Hi everybody, it's 12 o'clock and in the season of Lent I've been doing on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays one topic related to the season of Lent. Before I begin, I must tell you that we yesterday concluded a retreat for young people. 56 young people joined us here at St. Stephen's. We had Deacon Ivan preaching, Father Omar preaching, Father Clifton preaching. We had Father Sean also available for confessions, myself and a wonderful team. And it was wonderful to see our young people go so filled with the Spirit after 3 days. It was a 3-day live-in retreat. We said it was going to be a no-frills retreat, but as I always say, I set the bar so low so that everything that you get after that is a great blessing. And the highlight of the retreat was the healing service, which was tremendous. It was we went to the Villa Teresa convent next door, warmly welcomed by the nuns, and Deacon Ivan had this beautiful healing service, and so many of our young children simply broke down, struggling with their pains, their sorrows. But I want to share, before I do the teaching of today on Lenten days of fast, the experience of one of the young boys, and I won't mention his name, but he came here to the retreat. He says he had never been to church for 6 years, and he came for the retreat. He said he was already an alcoholic, already on substances, and he came here only because a family member threatened to cut off all his money. So he came here with the intention that he would spend 3 days, go back, and then asked his friends literally to keep the bottle ready. The long and short of it was he found the courage to address his fears, and he testified. I'm not breaking anybody's seal of confession. He testified it at the end of the mission publicly. He said, I'm finding the grace to fight my alcoholism, my addictions, and I praise God for what happened yesterday, not only in the life of this young man, but in the life of so many others. And I pray and I ask you to continue to pray for these young people who came for the retreat, because the minute they step out into the real world, the evil one wants to claim them back. Every time God gives us a blessing, the evil one steps in to take away that blessing. So please pray for our young people, especially for this young man who has been in my thoughts since yesterday. Now, I want to do a teaching today more on fasting. I'll make a reference to abstinence and maybe teach you a little bit about abstinence later. But coming to fasting and abstinence are often linked together or sometimes even mixed up. But the two are quite different. They are different disciplines entirely. Now, fasting has always been a very popular religious practice. It has to do with the quantity of food eaten on a particular day. Either you eat a little food and therefore you fast, or you eat no food at all. Abstinence, and I'm just doing this to draw the distinction, abstinence on the other hand refers to the kind of food that you deny yourself or you give up. The most common example of abstinence mostly for people is meat. Now, alternatively, one could also abstain from doing something that one is really used to enjoy, or likes very much. For example, at the end of the day, I like to sit down and watch some program, 20 minutes of Netflix or half an hour of Netflix. Beyond that, I'm so tired, I just fall asleep. But I could tell the Lord, I abstain from that so that I can pray a little longer from that recreation. So that's to do with abstinence. Now, a little bit about the history of this Lenten fasting. You see, up to the year 313, up to the Emperor Constantine, the church was really persecuted. And after 313, the persecution of the Christians ended. It was at this time that the church began a public and a more concise process of accepting new adult believers. These new adult believers who wanted to be Christians were called the catechumens. Now, the catechumens' final phase of preparation for baptism included a period of fasting. And this period of fasting was introduced to support as it were, changes in their lifestyle. Now, this fasting was also introduced in imitation of Jesus' 40 days of fasting in the desert. You can see it in Matthew chapter 4, verse 2. So, the catechumens fasted for 40 days just before their baptism, and their baptism took place on Easter Sunday. So, the whole period of Lent was a period of fasting. Now, this period of fasting was also in imitation not only of Jesus but of Moses. Moses' 40 days on Mount Sinai in Exodus chapter 34, verse 28. Also, you will see Elijah's 40 days fast on his journey to Mount Horeb in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 8, and the 40 years, obviously, that the Israelites spent in the desert. Now, while this ritual preparation for Easter was a special time at first only for the catechumens, only the catechumens fasted for 40 days before their baptism, gradually it became popular for those who were also baptized, and they began also to practice this period of tradition of fasting for 40 days before Easter. Now, when the catechumenate process was discontinued in the Middle Ages, why? Because during the Middle Ages there was a widespread custom of infant baptism. So when that process of the catechumens, this long period of preparation, was discontinued, the Christians continued with the tradition of fasting for 40 days in preparation for Easter. This period of fasting began on Ash Wednesday, like we do today, begin it on Ash Wednesday, and it continued to the evening of Holy Saturday. But if you look carefully in the calendar, you will notice that the 6 Sundays in Lent were excluded. If you count the 6 Sundays in Lent, you will get a total of 46 days and not 40 days. Though we keep saying 40 days of Lent, the totality is 46. Now, the Sundays were considered weekly memorials of Jesus' resurrection. They were known as the Little Easters. Each Sunday is the day when Jesus rose. They are considered Little Easters. And therefore, the Sundays in Easter are excluded from Lenten practices of fasting and abstinence. In fact, on Sundays, you don't kneel and say your prayers, you stand and say your prayers. So very technically, and let me say this again, Sundays are not a day of fast or abstinence. Now, I know that many of us continue to fast and abstain even on Sundays. If you do that and you are happy doing it, please don't discontinue that practice. Yeah, but technically, if you speak of 40 days of fast and abstinence, you can drop off the Sundays, and you are not obliged to fast and abstain on Sundays. Now, while fasting and abstinence began as voluntary practices in the early church in imitation of the catechumens, gradually they became very strict, and gradually fasting was enforced by church law. From the 400s to the 800s, only one meal a day, usually in the evening according to their local customs, was permitted. One meal, that's it, in the evening. Meat, fish, alcohol, and in some places even eggs and milk products were completely forbidden. Then, beginning in the 10th century, it became customary to eat this meal at night in the afternoon. So you had only one meal, and that meal was had in the afternoon. So you skipped your night meal. By the 14th century, a light meal was permitted in the evening. So by 14th century, you could have a full meal in the afternoon and a light meal in the evening. In the Middle Ages, the prohibition against fish and dairy products during Lent was lifted. So by the Middle Ages, it was only meat that you could not eat. You could eat fish, you could eat dairy products. Now, a rather severe Lenten discipline of fasting and abstinence remained in force in the church right up till 1966. Yeah, only one main meal was permitted on all days of Lent up to 1966. Only one main meal was permitted on all days of Lent. Remember, Sundays was an exception. So except Sundays, and this law of fasting applied to those who were between the ages of 21 and 59. That law of fasting still exists till today. Now, besides this, 2 other meatless meals were permitted, and these meals had to be sufficient to maintain strength, but together not equaling one full meal. So let me explain. Up to 1966, you were allowed one meal without any meat, and then you were allowed to have a light breakfast and a light dinner, but the light breakfast and light dinner had to equal another meal. So basically, you were skipping one meal in the day. Now, all of this changed with an apostolic constitution by Pope Paul VI, and this significantly altered the formerly very strict Lenten fast and recognized the rules governing penitence. It reaffirmed that, as Pope Paul VI said, Lent preserves its penitential character. And now, from now on, Ash Wednesday and all the Fridays of Lent were to be observed as day of penitence. Now, the manner in which penitence must be observed on such days was by abstaining from meat on all Fridays of Lent and by abstaining and fasting on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. Ash Wednesday and Good Friday are the only 2 days of compulsory fasting that we have in the church at present. Now, those that are excused from fast and abstinence outside the age limits of 21 to 59 include those who are physically or mentally ill. It also includes those who are individuals who are suffering from chronic illnesses such as diabetes or blood pressure or heart issues. Also included are pregnant women or nursing women. Now, in all cases, common sense should prevail. An ill person should not further jeopardize their health by fasting. And for those outside the age limits, canon law notes that, and I'm quoting canon law, pastors of souls and parents are to ensure that even those who by reason of their age are not bound by the law of fasting and abstinence are taught the true meaning of penance. So very broadly understood, fasting is willingly refraining from enjoying something that is known to you to be good. In ordinary use, to fast can be partial, which means you can restrict the amount of the kind of food that is eaten, or fasting also can be complete. It can be a total fast that is left up to you. Now, though fasting appears to be a physical act, in fact, it is meant to be a spiritual undertaking, and I hope you reflect on this. It's not just a physical act, it's a spiritual undertaking. St. Thomas Aquinas ascribed a threefold purpose to fasting. He said fasting, it tames, it controls our desires. Fasting also enhances the mind's ability to contemplate the divine, to focus on God, to focus on spiritual realities. And fasting is an act that serves as a satisfaction also for our sinfulness. Our contrition, to show our act of contrition, we also fast. Now, regardless of the nature or the duration of fasting, restricting what we eat when we eat and how much is eaten should be seen as the minimal response to the Lord's call to live this Lenten season as a time of great penance and conversion. Before I say goodbye to this midday talk of mine in the season of Lent, I also want to acknowledge that at our retreat, we had Dr. Divina Prabhu, who has been following our teachings all through the pandemic, all through the lockdown. And when I announced the retreat, she was the first one to call me up and said, I'm sending my children. One of her sons, Arush, is studying his MBBS, and her daughter, Damita. And she said, I'm sending both my children. And I said to her, from Chennai? And she said, yes, I'm putting them on a flight, sending them to Bombay, and sending them for the retreat. I was really touched by Dr. Prabhu's kindness of entrusting her children to my care, to my spiritual care, and I do hope the Lord will bless them. At the end of the retreat, they gave me a little gift. Strangely, I'm not a lover of motorbikes, but I love these little models. I have a car and I have now this one, and I just put it out to say thank you. Thank you to Arush and Damita, and may God bless you and you and your family and all your friends in Chennai. You all were telling me how many friends, how many YouTube followers there are in Chennai. So God bless you for your love and your kindness. Have a blessed day, everybody, today. And don't forget that we begin our missions here at St. Stephen's Church on Friday with Deacon Ivan. And if you want the details, just send me a WhatsApp message on 98202 42151. We'll be broadcasting the missions live, but for those who can come to St. Stephen's, we would love you to be with us. God bless you.